So we're going to talk about columns and rows now, selecting the columns and rows. And then we're going to change some of the properties of the columns and rows, namely the heights of the rows and the widths of the columns. So we're back in Excel. One of the things you're going to do a lot of is selecting columns and rows to change the widths and the heights, to do some formatting in a large area. So we're going to talk about how we go about doing that. To select a column, you just click the column header. To select a range of columns that are next to each other, click the column header and drag across. To select some columns that are not next to each other, that are non-contiguous, once you make your first selection, press and hold the Control key down and make your next selection. So we can select several ranges, and I can drag across. And the same thing is true with rows. Drag down, press Control, select that one, select those two, and so on. So one of the reasons we would be selecting columns and rows is to accommodate the data that's contained within the cells. The default row height and column width is driven somewhat by the default font. Calibri is the default font. We can change that, and if the change is for a font that's larger in size, then these next two measurements that I'm going to show you will change and adjust, or can change and adjust. The first measurement is the row height. The row height is measured in terms of points and pixels. It's 15 points and 20 pixels. 96 pixels make up an inch, so this is about 2/10 of an inch. The column width is made up of character spaces, 8.43, and pixels. So you can increase the row height up to 409.5 points, or 546 pixels. The widest column width is 255 character spaces, 254.86, close enough, or 1789 pixels. So I'm going to Control Z to undo that and Control Z to undo that. So we're back to the standard looking worksheet. So we can adjust the row height and the column width of a single row or column, but we can also adjust the row height and the column width of multiple rows and columns. In fact, we can adjust them simultaneously, however many it is that we've selected. So I'm going to click column C and drag across to column K, and the default column width is what it was when we opened up the workbook, 8.43 character spaces or 64 pixels. If I drag to the right, I am going to increase the width to what's displayed, and it looks like it's only going to increase column I, but when I release, it actually increases the width simultaneously for all the selected columns to the exact same width that we just adjusted I to, which is 15.29 character spaces or 112 pixels. And rows, of course, work the same way. And it would work with even non-contiguous selections. So I can increase the height of all of those selected rows. So that's an introduction to rows and columns. We selected some rows and columns, and then we talked about changing some of the properties of the rows and the columns, namely the column width and the row height, and the maximum limitations we have for those two adjustments, and also about where that size is derived from in the first place, namely the default font.